this evening we have Nicola Chester. Very pleased to have Nicola with us. Nicola's an award-winning nature writer, locally from Inkpen. She writes for The Guardian, the RSPB, and does the nature notes, if you've read those in the Weekly News. Her book, just here, Exhibit A, On Gallows Down, was published last year and is due out in paperback this month?
Yes.
Yeah, this month.
About 10 days now, I think.
One nice quote I found that you'd said was, I'm sure you've said lots of nice quotes, my whole point in writing is to engage people with nature, to move them and make them want to protect it. And with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Nicola. Off you go.
Okay, thank you, Rose. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm going to sort of dance awkwardly in front of the screen here. This is just, it's really a prompt and some nice pictures, some terrible pictures as well, and I don't mean in that I've taken them badly, some that will make you quite shocked, I think, about some of our local wildlife. So what I want to do with this talk, I want to start off by reading a little bit from my book. But the whole idea of this talk in particular was, it was titled, How Do We Stand Up for Nature? And I'm sure that, I know that a lot of you here do that in spades. You do, and you probably do a lot of things awful lot better than I do as well. And I'll talk about that later as well. Yeah, and I just want to sort of take you through a little bit of my journey, how I got there and what I'm doing there, and how I stand up for nature, and the difficulties with that, and how much it hurts sometimes and wounds us, and how we have very little choice in the current climate, but to get back up and go again. Because there is hope. That's the thing about nature, there's always hope. You will always see something that helps you get up again and go again. So I want to talk a bit about that. And I'd really like this to be sort of quite casual. I'd like to hear what you're doing, how you're doing, what you're doing for nature, how you cope, and maybe we can have a bit of learning from each other. I also want to launch what I've grandly called our Swift Town project. And at the moment, it's just an idea from John O'Gaunt's school, where I'm also a school librarian. Standing up for nature is woven through every single thing I do in my life. And that includes shoveling into my job as librarian at John O'Gaunt's school. I've got a lovely, lovely eco club. And part of an idea that we want to make Hungerford an eco town at some point, with heat, with all the wonderful things that's already going on. We know we can do a lot of things much better, so we want to sort of team up with you. But it's a long, slow process. There's a lot going on. There's a lot needs to be done. But part of this is launching this Swift project, which actually is quite a simple thing, and it's a wonderful celebratory thing. So I'll come on to that at the end. Okay, so without a clicker, let's see if we can. Okay, so we've talked about book. Just some awkward, uncomfortable self-promotion here. But I won the Richard Jefferies Award for nature writing last month, which is just amazing. And then it's just been longlisted for the Wainwright Prize, which I've dreamt of. I remember this prize coming out. I think it's only been going for, I think it's under 10 years. And I remember thinking, this is brilliant, because when I started writing for nature, there were very few women doing it, for starters. And I'm going back. I've been writing for nearly 20 years, as in getting things published. Very few women doing it. And the whole genre was just not very diverse, and this has exploded recently. So to be up there amongst some amazing authors on this long list is just phenomenal. And if I get no further, I'm quite happy with that. This is me. This is me. This is when it all started. I think that passion for nature, that love for nature. This is me on what we used to call the moors in Pangbourne, where I grew up. I did an awful lot of moving around when I was little, but in a very small area. It was only within quite often a 10-mile radius, even smaller than that sometimes. Each time though, I was pulled away from what I knew, from any friends that I'd made. I went to 5 different primary schools. quite hard to make friends, and the animals were my friends. Nature was my friend. That's how I belonged. I got in there. I knew my landscape very well. It was a time when you could just go out into the fields and play. You didn't have to worry about cars. You didn't have to worry about all sorts of things. We probably did, but we just didn't. You came back for tea when you were hungry, that sort of thing, which is wonderful. But I very quickly learnt that not only could I be taken away from these things that I loved, and it wasn't the houses that I remembered, it wasn't sometimes the people that I left, it was the local landscape, it was the trees around me that I really missed, the rivers. There's a wonderful chalk stream just here that I played in a lot. But I learned that actually nature can be taken away from you very quickly. This is a time when the elm trees had mostly contracted their disease. They're doing what the ash trees are doing now. So a lot of trees were already dying and dead. But I suppose my first shock, if you like, was growing up on Greenham Common, and this wide open playground. We used to go up there and play and be out all day. And one day we were riding the riding school ponies down a track, came to a chain link fence, and then another chain link fence, and another, and quite quickly we watched the nuclear bunkers being built. We watched the nuclear missiles being flown in. It was all quite exciting as well as absolutely terrifying. But we were fenced out of our common. It was taken from us. And then what happened next is the peace women came. And there was an awful lot of local suspicion about them. We were all very curious as children. And I very quickly learned that they were this huge edifying force. They were hope, and they were a way that I could see we could get our common back. We could make a protest, we could make a stand, not just for the nuclear missiles. I was 11 when they came in, but I realised they were this huge, force of mass destruction, but also for the wild things that were on the common that we could no longer reach. And that inspired me a lot. So a few years later, Newbury Bypass came and cut through pretty much my childhood playground. So Triple SIs, there's an endless list in here of what it cut through, but the things that roads should never be built through. And it's one of those situations where you think, well, what are these laws for? What is a tree protection order for if somebody can cut it down anyway and just absorb the cost of that into whatever they're planning? It was the start of that journey. So I will get to read a bit from my book in a minute. So just a couple of pictures from Newbury Bypass. And it was a terrible time. It was a very, very upsetting time, but it was also a very galvanising time. I met people that wanted the same thing I wanted. And it was a very powerful time of action. You felt that actually there is something I can do. And although the bypass was built, and I have been on it since, this tree, I don't know if anybody recognises it from its stately outline, but that tree is still standing. It's called Middle Oak, and somebody had the foresight to realise that it was actually on the slipway as you go from Speenhamland down onto the bypass. So somebody said, hang on a minute, there were 2 tree houses in this tree, an awful lot of people up there. I took this from the ground, not brave enough to climb it. But they had the foresight to realise that actually, no, this tree could be saved. And it became quite a symbol at the time. It was blessed by druids. Arthur Pendragon came down and blessed it with his sword. And there was a treaty drawn up with the Under-Sheriff of Berkshire, and it was quite comical at the time, because he was then hurled, we hurled tomatoes at him and chased him out of town. It's a bit like the outlaws chasing out the sheriff. But the tree was saved, and as a symbol, it's a very powerful one, and I give it a little nod each time I go by. And you kind of think that perhaps that was enough. And I remember being absolutely, utterly exhausted by the intensity of the emotion of that time. But what I found is that even if you live in the most stunning place, I live just below the hills. Everybody recognise where they say Cúmja Bit? So I'm very lucky. I live in we don't own the house, but we live in a little cottage, farm worker's cottage, underneath the hill. It's my 3 children. Actually, I think it's my husband and the 2 children. But they've grown up here. It's an absolute stunning place. And you'd think that, I'll just show you, I'll just flick through these, but we've got, this is the other side of Walbury Hill, some oxy daisies, as you say in Berkshire. And you look at that and you think, wow, it's, you know, I think most of us know it's pretty denuded of nature when you look at some of these fields. But there's also an awful lot of very special stuff up there as well. I trespassed to get this picture. And again, this is Cold Harbour Farm. I pass this on my way to work every day. You've got the downs behind. So I think, I'll just flick through these. I'll pause there actually. So what I'm trying to say with these pictures is that you can't run away from this. You cannot run away from the nature crisis or the wider climate crisis. So I think you can either choose to just ignore it or you choose to do something. And that something can be big things, they can be enormous things, they can be, as I did when I was in my early 20s, you can put your body on the line, you can put that in the way. You can do sometimes big things where occasionally I put my home in the way because my landlord owns pretty much most of what you can see there up to that line. And that does also put me amiss. Or you can do really small things every day. You do what you can. I put my children up here to illustrate this fact actually. My two daughters went to see Billie Eilish in London. It was a big thing for them, big present, sort of birthday and Christmas presents combined. And do you all know who Billie Eilish is? I presume you. So, singer, musician. And she's part of the movement, I've temporarily forgotten the name of it, but Musicians for the Planet. No Music on a Dead Planet is what she talks about a lot. And she talks about imperfect activism, and I quite like that. And these three like it as well. They're all activists in their own way. And the message that she was giving out to particularly young people who are going to bear the brunt of what we're feeling already, of not just the nature crisis but the environmental crisis, is that she's saying you do what you can. You cannot do something all the time. You cannot always do big things. Sometimes you can't do big things, but you can perhaps sign a petition here, there, or other. You can be walking down the street and go, why look, there's a swift, everybody, and make an idiot of yourself. But you can point out that bird and let people know it's something to celebrate. You can be in the library at Newbury Library where I used to work, and you can set up a tripod on the peregrine falcon that's up there, that was just visiting at the time, and it's now nesting, which is brilliant. It's a wonderful, positive story. There's lots of little things you can do. So I'm going to read, if you don't mind. I'm hoping I haven't chosen too long a piece to read from, but this idyllic place, talking about the crisis coming to you all the time. The felling of trees around me hasn't stopped. I can live in the most wonderful, I've got a wood at the back of the house called Nightingale's Wood. It's half what it was a few weeks ago. The woods are just out of shot in this picture actually. I just might move that one and show you. So this is my house is here. I'm sitting in my house. It's my little writing hut. There were 5 of us in our house, and it's a really small house. So my writing hut, my dad gave to me a few years ago. It's just this wonderful little sanctuary. But you can see we've got the farming right there, and it's an idyllic harvest scene. But it's not when the sprayer is going up and down, and the spray drift is coming into the garden and killing things, and going all over your washing, and you're worrying about your children. This wood here is Nightingale's Wood. 35 to 40 years ago there were nightingales in it still. There aren't any more. And there aren't many trees in it at the moment either. Half of it is gone. Before I tell you the rest of the story, I will read from here. Now this is a wood. Does anyone know Ink Pen and the woods in the middle of Ink Pen? Okay. So it's sort of like an unofficial common. It was a common once. It's now called the Firs Plantation. And around sort of, maybe around once every, I suppose you might say generation, so maybe once every 15 or 20 years, somebody comes in, claims ownership, chops a load of trees down. And in between, everybody plays there, everybody goes there. They cycle through it, they walk their dogs through it, we go badger watching in it. It feels very much like our place. And when I say our, I mean anybody that comes to visit. I don't mean ours, the village. That's very important. So I will read. The spring before we lost Dad, the wood the children had grown up in, and countless village children before them, was ravaged, shockingly, unexpectedly, and without warning, for its timber. The wood, known by several names, but to us as the Stickswalk, was at the centre of our strung-out village. To us all and for generations, it was a free-roaming, open-access place of dens, dams, bridges, dog walkers, horse riders, mountain bikers, badger and bird watchers. The rich, bright ochre clay by the Ingle Brook, which my children called the treacle mine, had in the past sustained a small pottery industry and earned villagers the old name of Yellowlegs, their boots and calves no doubt always splashed and smeared by the sunset-coloured mud. Historically part of Inkpen's great common, much of it was mixed deciduous woodland, with streams, remnant patches of derelict heathland, pioneer self-seeded birch and pine. Except, a forgotten plantation of fir trees. Except someone hadn't forgotten. One of the entrances to the wood was cathedraled and stained glass with a spectacular and much-loved avenue of strong, healthy and towering beech trees. We loved the green underwatery light they made on the road to school. It was one of my son's favourite places to cycle under. One spring morning, in the middle of bird nesting season, we came home from school to find all the beeches felled on one side. Along with oaks and ash of a substantial age, they were already being stacked. It was as if a bomb had hit the aisle of our cathedral. Nobody knew the men wielding the chainsaws and arrogantly blocking the road and the bus routes. They were evasive and rude, knew nothing nor cared about the place. They told everyone the trees were dangerous. The following day on the way to school, my daughter and I walked down the potholed road to meet them. Me in my heels and my best Lois Lane trench coat with a slick of postbox red lipstick, a smile and a reporter's notebook. My smallest daughter suppressing all her fury in her school uniform and waist-length wild hair. I don't want to read the whole chapter, you might fall asleep. My phone pinged with a message from my other daughter, who had just gone by on the school minibus. The sight of the felled trees causing the busload of children to erupt in anger as they went past, Instagramming pictures on their phones in turn. Boudicca's children rebelling. I reached the men and smiled, asked if I could trouble the foreman a moment, as I understood that some of the villagers had been giving them grief. Gave him my pseudonym, Captain Swing style, borrowed from long-gone, dispossessed commoners and my mother's maiden name. I feigned indifference and gave him some conspiratorial confidence, faked a newspaper story and got stuff out of him. Between you and me and your newspaper, he joked, who do these locals think they are? We're going to take a lot more trees down through the wood and fence off this footpath so they can't ever use it again. That'll teach them. I'd got enough out of him. And where is the ash tree with the protected red kite's nest in it, I asked. He hesitated, reddened. No birds nesting here, love, he said, and no ash trees. These are all old beech. This was before ash died back. I ought to add. He leaned down, loomed, then planted his legs deliberately, proprietorially. I smiled again. It's bird nesting season. That's an ash tree, and so is that, I said, patting them. I could tell oak from ash, chainsaw from handsaw, even with their limbs lopped off. Have you done an environmental impact assessment? I felt small and silly and ineffectual in my anger in front of the men with my daughter, but she stood tall and primed for action, incensed and righteous, a whippy sapling rooted in the place and confident in her conviction that this would not happen. But I had to turn away. I, who had brought her up with such stories, of how I lay in front of cherry pickers and breached police lines, stood in front of men wielding chainsaws inches from my face and wrist in another wood. What could I do here? So I tell you what I did do. I should put that down for a moment. We got together as villagers over pear bellinis. It was very pen. And we took our own action. We found out who these people were and we wrote letters. We didn't win. They took a lot of the trees down. and quite viciously. The more we acted, the more they gave us. So they took down particular trees, particularly quirky trees, trees with swings in. You know, they weren't pulling any punches, but I'd been there before as well. And I think we gave them a run for their money. So what I'm saying is that there are things that you can do, and I think we loved that wood better when they had gone, and they were within their rights to do that, that they had bought the wood. We now keep records of what we find there. Somebody has recently spotted a purple emperor butterfly there. We have evidence of dormice and adders. These are all protected species. So if they come at us again, we're going to demand an environmental impact assessment, and we have records of these creatures being there. So they'll have a very hard job to come back at us again. So there are things we can do. This is some gratuitous shots of coombe, actually. I'm not going to... Well, this one, so this is very early spring from Walbury Hill, which is the highest hill in southeast England. Actually, the highest hill in southern England, if you don't count the moors of the west. It's pretty high, anyway. The beacon from there is fantastic. These trees, so this is winter, and again, this is before ash dieback was around, but hadn't really started to show rear its head, I suppose. There's not a lot of space for wildlife in this idyllic, rolling, beautiful landscape. I've worked with the gamekeeper on the estate, and I work with the estate manager occasionally. I get brought in and pushed back all the time. I feel like giving up, and I go again. But at the moment, all these woods that you can see, and so many more that you can't all hear, I would say about 90% of them are being felled right now, and the felling started in April, right bang in the middle of bird nesting season. And we get rare birds here. So I'm just going to, pictures in the wrong order really. I think this is just to illustrate, before I go on to the tree felling that's going on at the moment, how special this place is, the place we live in, and this you know, the downlands are replicated all around us. You know, you probably visit different downlands, but it's such a privilege to be able to get up here in the snow. These are the wonderful meadow anthills that have been up here for hundreds and hundreds of years, unploughed land on the ramparts of Walbury Hill. I'll come back to this picture because that's a little story of hope. This one isn't. This is, these are the woods behind my house that I sort of said. Now, I have known these woods for getting on for 20 years. My children have always known these woods. They've played in them, probably knew every tree. And what's going on here is being replicated all around. I don't know about the country, but certainly around the south of England, estate after estate after estate. And there are big grants at the moment for forestry, and what they're doing is they're taking out the dead and dying ash trees. That's most of what you can see there, and then any other tree that actually doesn't fit. So it's a big forestry project, and there's an awful lot of trees there that are not good for woodland. There's cherry laurel, which gamekeepers have traditionally planted. There's western red cedar, so they are taking out those sort of trees as well. And what they're going to do is replant, which is fantastic in a way. You think, okay, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to rejuvenate these woods, to get them all going again, but just not in springtime, not when the birds are nesting, not when a bat survey hasn't been done, and when bird nests. Some of these trees they've stopped because there are birds' nests in them, but they're carrying on around them with massive machinery. Yeah, and this sort of, I almost can't bear to look at this picture. So this is my youngest daughter, Rosie. I'm going to stand behind it because it'll make me cry. My youngest daughter, Rosie. And I sort of said, God, you should see what they've done. We'll go down this footpath and there's, you know, I didn't quite realise, and I should have done, how much she was affected by it and how upset she was. And she said, you know, this kept me going through lockdown. I would come out here with my books and, you know. You can see actually here that most of this is ash. And you've got the cherry laurel in the background there. But this is going on, and it shouldn't be. But the law has weaknesses. you're not allowed to cut hedges at this time of year because birds are nesting it. You're not allowed to cut trees down with birds nesting in them. But if it's part of your normal working practice and cannot easily be avoided, you can go ahead. So there's always loopholes. Okay. This is taking a bit of a negative note, and I think I have to pick this up again. and around another thing I try and do around this is a broom rake. It's a parasitic plant that it lacks chlorophyll because it takes everything from the roots of the particular plant that it's attached to. This is a nectar strip around the house. So there are lots of wonderful things that farmers are doing, and this isn't about blaming farmers at all. This is they need our help, they need support and grants to bring nature back to farming. That's a very important point. This is a nectar strip around the house, but it was topped recently. And again, I was thinking, it's June, why are you doing this now? The argument behind it was they wanted to get rid of the docks and the nettles and bring more of the clover and the nectar flowers up, so I kind of went with that. But they've also mown all the field headlands around all in June. Again, no good for the wildlife. Butterfly, the ground nesting birds, the yellowhammers, the woodlark, the skylark, not good use for them. But as I was going back across this field, I found that quite a few of these have popped up. They've just been underneath the mower as it went over. And I've never seen them in the field before. And I just thought, well, hey, come on, nature it will, if we let it, if we give it a little chink, there is always hope there. And just to illustrate that, let's go back. This is Gallows Down, otherwise known as Inkpen Beacon, or no, Inkpen Hill. Sorry, the beacon is the other one, or Coombe Gibbet. And we're quite a ways over now. We're almost in Wiltshire. I have an ongoing battle with getting the grazing right on this hill. It's triple SI, and it's it's a man-made environment really. Without our intervention, it would be full of scrub and trees. But over thousands and thousands of years, grazing has made this wonderful short sward of flowers, very rare flowers, rarer than the rainforest. I think you can get, I can't remember the number, but in 1 square metre, there's flowers that are rarer than a rainforest, full of nectar as well. And this was the year that they took the sheep off at the right time, and it was absolutely golden with cowslips. You could see it from the Newbury bypass, this golden glow from the A34 of these fantastic flowers. And what this means, of course, is insects, which means birds, and the whole cycle can start to rebuild itself. Really, really important. The next year, the sheep were left on too long. They ate all the flowers off. The following year, it happened again. So again, you have to get up and you have to say, Mr. Estate Manager, please can we do something about this? I've tried to talk to the shepherd before, can we sort it out? They are working on it. There have been quite a few cowslips this year and there will be more flowers. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. So it's about sort of stepping out of that comfort zone, I think, and approaching people. And also, and this, I'm really hoping that this hasn't come across as quite an angry talk, because I'm quite angry today. Lots of things have happened to make me feel quite angry at the moment. I've had quite a week of trying to stand up for nature and failing. But the way to do this, I think, is to be friendly and open and go to people and say, do you know what, I know you can't do this, but maybe you can do that. And come to compromises with them. I think it's so important. Raging at people doesn't help. I did a little bit of that early in the week and it really didn't help. Because I think, I was at a barn dance last night at our village hall, and it was one of those wonderful events where our village came together, and you really felt that sense of community. It was really lovely, after all we've been through, it was a lovely celebration for charity. And we stopped between a locally written kennet reel, apparently, who knew? And we were reeling and jigging and crashing into each other and making fools of ourselves. And then we stopped for breath, and the caller said, right, let's just take a breath. And all of a sudden, I didn't notice it at first, but everybody was going to to the window and out the patio doors and going, oh, you got to see this. And before I knew it, everybody was outside, and it's not the best photo in the world. It doesn't portray what we could see, but it was the most beautiful sunset, and the hayfield outside was just golden. And the whole of the hall, must have been 50 people, were out there going, wow. It's like this collective community moment of awe. And it was just wonderful. It just lifted everybody. And everyone was like, what a fantastic place we live in. And to me, that's what a fantastic planet we live on. And that's the hope, that's the inspiration to do more, to do what we can. And I think that's so important. And I think that comes back to this positivity, and trying to jolly people along rather than just being angry at them all the time. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Actually, I don't know how long I've got time-wise.
If you like.
So, before I get on to our Swift Town project, I'd like to know any battles you've had, or any advice you've got you want to share, because I'd like this to be sort of a bit of a sharing thing, if you like. Is there something that you've seen happen, maybe locally, that has really hurt you, and you just want a penny?
Excuse me, verge cutting.
Oh, yes, go on.
And our village has little patches of grass that are either kept by West Berkshire Council or Sovereign Housing, and a lot of the residents now are trying to fight for what they call a Mohican of grass. You know, down the middle of a place, you know,
Right.
but it's not always easy to get the contractors to listen or to risk it, or, you know, I know Albourne's done quite a lot, carbon neutral Albourne, and they've got these blue hearts. Is this a plant life scheme where you get a blue heart sign and you can put it in your land to show it isn't deliberately ignored. This is a deliberate wildlife area. It's not just somebody's forgotten to mow the lawn.
Right.
So, but I know a lot of villages are trying, and I encourage everybody to talk to their parish council or their town council about it, because it is becoming recognised as a thing.
Yes, that's fantastic, and that's really encouraging. And I think to me, my garden's a bit of a mess. I don't really have time for much gardening, but I don't use any chemicals or slug pellets or anything like that. And we've let the grass grow up, and I cut paths through it. But I do get, I had one person said to me once in the village, I don't suppose you really bother with your garden since you rent your house. And that stung a bit, and I don't think they meant it. But no, that's not the case. I really care, because we have hedgehogs coming through. I once had a stoat in the garden that raided a thrush's nest, which was a very hard watch. But it kind of made me think, well, there's nature in red in tooth and claw. But yeah, and I think a lot of it is about changing perceptions. I think my mum, she lives in our village as well, and to her, she's very proud about the house and the garden, and she worries, and it's a very real worry about what people think about her if she doesn't cut her hedge and cut her lawn. So she's obsessed about cut the grass, and she'll do it all the time. She's got a little wildlife patch that we've and actually it's been the grandchildren really that have convinced her to do that, not me nagging on all the time. But she really genuinely does get worried about what people will think if she's neglected her garden. She worries about authorities, because it borders the road, you know, whether they will come tell her off because she doesn't cut her hedge. So I think it's a very real cultural shift that we need to make, and I think we do need to make it, but it's also about that compromise. So I love the idea of that Mohican where you can mow. I can hear the swifts outside. Where you can mow, you know, so that people know this is, yes, it's neat, it's being cared for. You can put your signs up, but there's this patch for wildlife as well. Yeah, I like that. Anybody else want to share any experiences? Yeah.
We live in Priory Road, just very close to the John Grunt School where you work. And there is a sort of area just close to the leisure centre and the school, like a big splay, which was altered from being a footpath to being a proper pavement.
Yes.
And an area that's kind of being neglected. But there are 2 good trees on that area. And my husband and I contacted the environmental part of the local council and asked if they could, and we even offered to pay if we could put several more trees, because there was certainly room for about 4 more trees along that section.
Right.
You probably can picture where I'm
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
and somebody from the council very kindly came out and spent a bit of time with us.
Right.
Probably it must be about 3 years ago now.
Okay.
And it was more or less agreed, or we felt it was more or less agreed with him, that the council would do that.
Okay.
But sadly, nothing has happened. I'm very much at fault for not having, followed it up really.
Well, no, I think we also have to live in the world. We also have busy lives, and it's hard to keep that momentum up, but you can always pick that up again. And,
Well, it's like we've got a town councillor in the room with us.
And this wasn't
very
the town
handy.
council, this was West Berkshire.
Oh, was
Council.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've passed there, and I think I passed there quite a bit, and I'm constantly turning my head, and I'm sure there's quite a few wildflowers coming up there. If it's the patch, I think there's violets.
There are a few, and I'm very tempted to go along there and scatter a few more seeds.
Excellent.
I think
That's
we'll
good
do.
activism.
Yeah.
No, that's excellent.
In defence of, the tree team, which
Yeah.
is probably who you spoke to,
Yeah.
they are grossly understaffed and under-resourced.
Oh, are they?
And
Okay.
some of us are fighting to get more resources on that.
Okay.
It's a uphill battle,
Right.
unfortunately. So
Oh, thank you for saying that.
We've been planting trees with our vicar.
Oh yes, you've been doing amazing things.
Yeah,
at the church.
you got some more trees coming fast, so maybe this year or next year.
Excellent, excellent. And hasn't it just been made an eco church?
Yeah.
Isn't it on a wall?
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's really good news. Yeah, yeah. And I think I'm hoping that we can link up a bit more with the church, with the school, with the eco club as well.
Yeah, because he wants to do some more trees for you at your school.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I'm sure we can do that. I have to have little battles with the caretaker. Very friendly battles. Yes. Yes. Yeah, we will. Yeah, I think his words are, haven't we got enough trees around? Yes.
I think the churches are one of the.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
was just going to say the churches are actually some of the people and groups that are leading the fight for nature, and the environment. There's quite a lot happening, in Newbury with the churches, and they're very keen, and they are, because I think people are aware of how intimate the human life is, melded with the natural environment. And that all goes with you next to God, I guess.
Yes.
And, so there is quite a lot of enthusiasm in various churches that I've spoken to in and around Newbury.
Okay.
So it's very encouraging.
That is it is really encouraging. Yeah, and I suppose I imagine a lot of it comes from perhaps the churchyards as well, doesn't it? But that I mean, the thing is we are part of nature. We're not apart from it. Although sometimes we might act that we are, but no, that's really important. I think there's an awful lot of goodwill out there, and I think it's about that sort of being open, isn't it, and being friendly, and making those links. Yeah. Yes.
Your focus in this evening is of being really positive about things we can do, which is brilliant and important. And because you started off talking about the Newbury Bypass campaign and reflecting back 20 years, and the overall public perception was very different then, wasn't it? There wasn't the understanding about the importance of nature and all those ISIs that were being important habitats that were being trashed, whereas now I think whatever we as individuals do, we're actually pushing at an open door in many ways.
Yes.
My dealings with staff at the council and in the district council, the countryside team, they're just so keen to help local environmental initiatives now. So if you can get in the right way, there's a lot that we can do that you couldn't have done 20 years ago, and taking everybody with us. Everybody's talking about rewilding like it's a wonderful thing now, aren't they? Rather than scared of being killed by wolves and things. You know, that's changed so quickly.
Yes, it has, and it's amazing. And I think it's important to sort of step back and realise that, isn't it? We have come a very long way. And I know that I can feel those young voices going, but it's not been quick enough, you know. But we're getting there, and I think we do need to. And I think actually that was a really important point about resources. And I think quite often we haven't got the resources or the time to be able to do what we really want to do, which can make things difficult. I mean, one of the things I try and say to the farm when I'm having my little gentle, friendly, cheery nags happen is do you know what, if you didn't mow the headlands, because we talk about the grass verges being mowed, the acres and acres of field margin that are mown every year around big estates like this one, it costs money. You've got to pay your farmer, your tractor driver to do it, you've got the fuel. Nobody's walking on that land because it's private, it's not open access, there's nobody
Why do
using
they do it then?
Well, this is a big question. I have no idea. And I've been years and years, and it is tidiness. They just want it to look neat and tidy. They want that sort of, here's the crop looking beautiful and pristine with nothing else in it but barley or whatever it is, and here's the nice, the mown grass.
We presumably want to keep the weeds down because they
There
would
is-
then gradually encroach into the crop.
Yes.
Yeah, so it would be an economic.
But
will
aren't they-
Absolutely,
cost
yes.
Aren't
Yeah, that's a good point.
Aren't farmers paid an incentive? I might be wrong, but I seem to remember that they're paid an incentive to keep margins, to keep quite wide margins around, extended from the hedgerows for wildlife. And I mean, I'm never quite sure of how to approach our farmers, because they do put wide margins around, but then they put weed killer on them. And I'm thinking, I don't think this is really what they're being paid for, when they keep these margins.
Yeah.
Or they mow them. And are there still incentives for farmers
Yes.
to do this?
There are, and they're changing a lot at the moment. And I'm hopeful that they might change for good. But there is a big, the weeds encroaching into the crop is a big thing. It's an economical thing, and that's very important. And what almost all of them will do now is weed kill probably about that much around the crop. So you've got that. And then you should have a field margin. Quite often what you've then got as well is a conservation strip where you might have, and usually you've planted something, so maybe a nectar-rich mix of clovers that I was showing earlier, clovers and vetches, which puts goodness back into the soil, acts as a buffer, but it's good for nectar, for pollinators and for wild birds as well. Sometimes you'll get wild bird cover, which they'll get grant for, which is lots of seed-rich plants. There's some fantastic areas up there if you just go slightly off the beaten path on a good day when no one's about. It's just wonderful. They'll get grants for that. But there's a classic bit underneath the hill where you've got the conservation strip, which is probably about from the door to here, and it's full of fantastic vetches and oxeye daisies at the moment, and butterflies and bees and skylarks nesting in it. And then you've got a very, very wide piece that's perhaps 2 or 3 times the width that's mown next to it.
Yeah.
And if you're a skylark, well, you nest there or there. It makes no odds to you whether there's flowers in it or not. Of course, if you're in this bit, then you've just been mown and you've had your nest mown. That's what I can't get my head around. And what I've tried to say to them is, look, why don't you just delay your mowing until the end of, even the end of July would make a difference, but or preferably the end of August. And then, you've got, your birds would have gone. It's not quite so important for most insects, There's a lot to be done, but it's very hard. It's very hard to know who to approach, because there are so many contractors on farms that literally just, it's their job. they go in, they do their job and go, and if you're going to say to them, don't be doing that, then they're going to lose money there. It's their livelihood. It's a very difficult balance, and I think I'm in quite a privileged position where I know the estate manager because he also collects the rent, and so I can talk to him. You know, he can also get rid of me if he wants to. So I do have to sort of tiptoe around a little bit, have a good relationship with him. But I know who these people are, so it's easier to approach them, and you know, I don't always get a good response.
I wonder how much ready advice is there for farmers on how to, I do sympathise with farmers. I'm sure that most of them struggle in many respects, but I just don't know. Are there bodies that will give them advice on how they can change their practices slightly, which in a way that won't affect them but will benefit nature?
I think there are bodies like there's the Farmer Friendly Network and the Game Wildlife. I forget the rest of it. Game and Wildlife. Anyway, but for farmers as well. And if they happen to have a shoot on the farm, which most do around here, they will advise. But I suppose they have to be open to that. They have to have the time as well. But most farmers want the wildlife on the place. They want to. They're proud of what they do.
It doesn't stop them. I mean, we've got masses of skylarks in the fields of rape.
Right.
We had around us, and then one day I'm out walking and they're spraying.
Yeah.
They're spraying the rape. I mean, presumably it's against mould or something, but there are just masses and masses of skylarks all nesting in those fields. And God knows what it does to them.
Yeah.
And there's nothing.
No, and I think it's got to be a huge movement. There's so much, because rape is quite hard to grow without the neonicotinoid sprays, which affect our bees particularly, and it keeps going through phases of being banned, and then they because they can't grow it because of flea beetle. It's this awful cycle in trying to grow things that we eat to feed us, and also to feed the animals that then feed us. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I'm sort of trying to come at it from a grassroots level, but it's much bigger than that. And I think lobbying and trying to understand is perhaps all we can do at the moment. It's a really difficult one.
Yeah, I just feel I'm on really shaky ground, going and complaining to someone, because I don't really understand the implications of a lot of this. I can see some of the consequences, but unless you understand it fully.
Yes, yeah. But I think that can be a way in itself, because most of us, I don't understand it all. I quite often, I mean, actually, one of the strips down the field, and the estate manager said, well, this is where the paragliders land, so they don't want the long grass because that would be quite tricky and quite dangerous. And if had I not spoken to him, I wouldn't have known that. And I think it's a way in. Tell me why you do it. Why do you do it? Why can we do this differently? And I think it's getting that conversation going. And I think a lot of farmers will expect. They are on the whole, speaking very broadly here, but quite defensive, and understandably so. They've got everybody criticising them, so it's about that openness, being friendly, saying, look, hey, I don't know why you're doing this, and what can you tell me, and having that conversation and building up that relationship if you can.
And another thing we can do, this is a very, very interesting transitional time now. Now we've left the European Union, then the agricultural supports are being phased out and are being replaced by ones that the British government is imposing, which in theory are environmental land management schemes. The farmers are now going to be paid to look after the environment rather than to grow food. But now there's going to be a huge backlash against that because of Ukraine, the war in Ukraine specifically, that people are going to be saying, actually, no, we must focus on growing food. And of course, that's understandable, and there's truth in that. But there's a real danger that that nature will get pushed out again. So actually, to talk to your MP and say, can you make sure that that nationally the focus is very much on respecting nature and doing all that we can within farmland, as Nicola's been talking about. So yeah, that's a really good time to be doing it.
It absolutely is, yeah.
Is Richard Bennion still of any use? Because I know he's doing quite good things at Englefield, isn't he? He's doing a lot of support to his tenant farmers.
Yes.
And obviously he knows all the farmers. I know he's not MP anymore, but is it worth leaning on him at all? I don't know.
He's a DEFRA minister at the moment.
Yeah, he is, isn't he? Or he what? Yeah.
Oh, he's in the Lords as a DEFRA.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. You know, he's friends with our landlords as well, and I think anybody with any kind of influence is always worth speaking to. There's a very good estate manager, actually, David Hill. He manages a couple of the estates along the river, and the Ealing estate, Gerald Palmer estate, and he's always open to all sorts of different ideas, and I think he's brilliant. He's very good on Twitter, if anyone's on Twitter, but he always tries to look at things from the other side, and yeah.
So if there are some good guys who the spotlight could be put on, would that help elevate them to be role models when others say, oh, okay, well, they've managed to do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I definitely think so. There's fantastic projects that go on just over the border in Wiltshire with the Marlborough Downs cluster, so where farmers get together, and I don't know, a few people nodding, absolutely incredible work done, and they're farming, I say traditionally, as in with chemicals and everything like that. I don't mean, you know, with the scythes and smocks, but but so they're farming, you know, as we all expect farmers to farm, but they're putting new dew ponds in. They're monitoring the birds. They're just doing incredible things out there, ringing and setting up beetle banks and field margins that are good, healthy ones that aren't mown at the wrong time of year. It's just fantastic, and I wish we could get more of that this way.
How was that set up then? What generated that?
I think it was partly North Wessex Downs.
There is money. There is DEFRA money.
There was a DEFRA money, yeah. You probably know more about it than I do, but North Wessex Downs and the Game and Wildlife GWCT. Game and Wildlife Countryside Trust, I think, but they do quite a lot of advising and that sort of thing as well.
But there was DEFRA money that went in.
Okay.
North Wessex Downs helped make it happen,
Right.
and then they had an agronomist and all sorts of people that was paid for. But before I left the North Wessex Downs, it was that money had stopped, but the farmers by then had got some sort of momentum amongst themselves. But there is a cluster down here that has been done more recently. But I'm not sure it's quite as dramatic. But then they didn't have the help.
No,
funding goes a long way.
It's that Fackham and Woody, and I think it's us as well.
Yeah.
And I think it at the moment it's sort of manifested itself as just sort of the shoots and buying. Let's all get together and do that bit together. I think. But I mean, maybe it will build. Maybe it will.
I think a number of years ago, I think it was as part of the summer festival, I went on a tour of the Chiltern estate. Is that?
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
And they're big into their environment. Well, that's certainly how in the no dig policy and trying to do everything they could. To be. So they seem to be on it.
They are. Excuse me. I'm just going to. Yes. They are. There's quite a few around. I remember they won an award, or they were runners up a few years back actually for their environmental work. And I think do they board a little hidden farm as well on one of them?
They might. Yes, I think they do.
Yeah, which is amazing. Amazing. But I think, that there are, they are around. And I think it's, I mean, for me in an art world, we'd all be like sheep drove the organic farm, something like that. But it's very different, very difficult. I think I went to a place in, it's called Farm Ed in Oxfordshire, where it's actually next to Jeremy Clarkson's farm. And they've set up little trial plots of herbal leys and to bring the wildlife back, as well as sustainable food production, regenerative farming. It's absolutely fascinating. If you ever get a chance, do go. And they've got a wonderful kitchen and the most wonderful food as well. It's brilliant. But it's small, and it's very community based and community led, but it's not something yet that they can multiply to for bigger farmers. The scale, I mean, I don't know much about the economical scale, but it's just not possible at the moment. But I mean, there's a lot of really good work going on out there, but there's a lot of terrible stuff going on with the woods and the birds, and we really are at that point where we're losing species at a rate of knots.
What are they doing that, when young farmers go off to agricultural college, what's the syllabus like these days? Is it still very much as it was, high yields,
I think I don't know for certain
because that's where it's got to develop, hasn't it? The younger generation who are going to be more aware and are probably not going into the industry quite as readily as their parents would like, I would imagine, because it's probably not an attractive or as attractive career. So it'd be interesting to know what's happening at places like Sparsholt and technical colleges.
I don't know is the honest answer. I knew a little bit more about the game and wildlife side of it, and sometimes the game is more important than the wildlife.
More revenue.
Yes. But I think what happened a lot in that case is that they were being taught a certain thing, and then they were going to work for older keepers who were then, well, you don't do it like that, you do it like this. And I think that probably doesn't happen so much with farming. So I honestly don't know, but you would think that there'd be far more focus on nature and wildlife and the sustainability than there ever was before. But I don't know, I must find out.
Apparently, I don't know if it was the Marlborough cluster, but somebody told me that the farmers actually get really competitive. How many plovers have you had on your farm? So, if you can get them to focus on it, then
it's fantastic, and I think most of them want that. The farm where we are, the farmers there are mostly contractors. We've got one that's still in the Thai cottage. And they're really lovely people. I've known them a very long time, but they know absolutely nothing about wildlife. I mean, a tractor driver stopped the other day, said, "Oh, I saw one of them black and white birds you're always on about." Well, what did you? I don't know. Did you mean it? Did you mean it? A lapwings? I hope you did, but I don't think he did. I think it was it could have been a pied white owl. It could have been anything. So that's always a bit hard to take. But it's not like that everywhere. Tricky one, isn't it?
The timing of you're saying it's just heartbreaking. Why can't they leave it a month? And that seems to be an easy win. You're not asking them to change their practices. So, is there anything as the community we can do, or is it just going to annoy them royally if more people start asking for this?
It's a very difficult. What I've discovered, this came as quite a shock actually, because I thought I had quite a bit of influence on the estate over the years through my friend the gamekeeper, where we're not friends anymore. Very long story that's not the place to talk about here. But I sort of was kind of pushed out of all that on the estate, and they've kind of brought me back in, which is really nice of them. I was quite surprised. They had a new actually a young woman, which is really refreshing on a farm, isn't it? It's sort of like a trainee estate manager, I suppose. Not trainee, but she's wonderful, and she knows an awful lot about forestry. And we had a good chat, we had a walk around the place, and I was really quite hopeful because she wants to regenerate the dew ponds and do all sorts of wonderful stuff. And I thought, well, great, I can help, I can be part of this. But I think what they were doing, I realise now, is getting me on board so I didn't kick off about the woods and the forestry too much, which is a bit of a shame. But then it made me think, well, actually, have I got a bit of oomph here? Have I got a bit of a voice and power, which I don't feel I've ever had before? But I think actually, having written a book, I've got quite a few followers on Twitter. You know, I know a lot of people, and I think they were responding to that because kind of once they'd got me on board with that, and I was like, well, not on board with it at all, not at all. But you know, I'd met the forester, and I'd kind of got to the point where I thought, well, we're at checkmate here. There's not an awful lot I can do here. You know, so I didn't sort of kick off in a big way. There's still time, but I think what it showed to me is that actually that is really important, because they did talk in the early days about sending letters out to all the villagers, because there's an awful lot of racket when the trees come down. These huge apocalyptic machines that do everything. They kind of saw the trees up and do everything all in one go and strip the wood, and it's a lot of noise to the village, and you'd think they'd notice and say, well, this isn't good, and approach the estate. So it hasn't happened as I thought it would, and I think people kind of just get on with their daily lives, and perhaps if they don't walk around there, they don't notice. But if people did notice, and if they say, look, come on, you know, this is terrible, I'm going to take a photograph of it, and I'm going to put it on social media, and I'm going to ask questions, and they might then listen more. But I think it has to be something that they can adjust. Like, for me, I think the compromise for me would be, well, don't do all the woods at once, don't do it this time of year, leave some standing dead wood that's safe, you know, and if you must, then do the rest, and maybe we can come to a compromise. So I think for me that's what it was about. But yeah, I don't know.
You said you'd taken photos, and
yeah,
because I think that seems a really positive way forward. That if there are areas that you know have some rare wildlife in,
yes.
if you collect evidence, then and then I mean, what it seems to me is if they come in with the intention of clearing an area, it can actually happen almost overnight, you know. And so, what can you do if you've got this evidence? Who do you go to stop something quickly?
To stop something, so you would. So if you've got records of things that that you've identified, and it's a learning process, you know. It's not. We don't all know everything, but if you think, for example, adders, and if you find out actually there's a really important thing that I didn't tell you about that wood, which I'll come on to in a minute. But if you know that animal might be protected, then record it. If it's something that might be rare, have a higher level of protection, you can record it with Thames Valley Environmental Records. There's a C on the end. Can't think what that stands for. Centre, probably, yes. And that's really important, because if I'd have done that with the wood in the village, it would have made a big difference.
So you do that. You must do that beforehand, as a sort of a proactive sort of preventative measure.
Yes.
And if that has been recorded, are you confident that they would not have got permission to come in and clear that land, even though it was their own land?
Yes, I am. And not in all cases, but in this case, yes. So what I forgot to tell you was that just across the field from that picture, I put a barn owl box up years ago. It was 2 years ago, actually. 2 years ago. It was a birthday present, and put it up in it. And it's a neighbour. We look after a horse for her. It's a neighbour's little bit of scruffy back garden. Put the box up there. I thought, we'll get jackdaws and kestrels like you do. But we got barn owls, and because I knew they were about. And when they were talking about the wood, and you know they were going to cut the wood down, I didn't know the owls were back then. They were kind of flying around, but in the box, and they would need to be roosting. But barn owls have got a Schedule 1 protection, environmental protection. So it's the highest level of protection anything can have. So you can't mess about with barn owl. So the forestry work actually started in the wood, sort of one over from this one, and I was watching, and I saw the bird go in the box. So immediately, lots of mixed feelings. I'm really, really worried that they're not going to hang around. They're going to hear the noise and be gone. Although barn owls traditionally nest in barns with a lot of human activity, so they get quite used to people. And this one is right on the edge of a footpath. But, and to their credit, and they had to really, I left work that morning, and I said, quick, I've just seen the barn owl. There's a barn owl nesting in that box, or it's going in. It's
And who do you send that to?
So I sent this to the estate manager of the farm. So that might be difficult to find out, but the estate manager, the owner, whoever you can find.
Obviously that varies from season to season, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, barn owls it doesn't, because they will roost through the winter and nest. So you can, if it's roosting there, it's also protected. But it's a barn. A lot of other species won't be. Once they finish nesting, they're not protected. But I came home that evening, and I opened my car door to complete silence. There wasn't a chainsaw to be heard anywhere. So I went to the farm. The farm was a bit cross. I wasn't flavour of the month for him. They said, they've gone off to another wood. They're not going to go. They're all down tools, and they've gone off because there's a barn owl, and they won't go near it. So, because it's a 6 month, up to a 6 month fine. It can be 6 months imprisonment. It can be an unlimited fine if they disturb a nesting barn owl or roosting barn owl.
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
if somebody owns a piece of woodland, do
Yes.
they have to, even though they own it, do they have to get some? Do they have to apply to cut down trees from somewhere?
Yes, they would have to.
So is it a bit like planning permission?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I mean, I think it depends. I don't know if it depends on the size of it, but I think it might. But certainly these woods, it's all legal. They've got a licence from the Forestry Commission to do that. I think the timing of it is up to them. That's what I've been told, but I don't know how true that is. But yeah, they have to get.
Okay, so if they have to get confirmation that they can carry out this work, and then if you record and tell, is it when they apply to do the work?
Yeah.
Will the information come in if you've said I've spotted an adder or a barn owl? Will it be there, and then they'll say yes or no because they know what has been recorded?
It should do. So what I had behind me was I went to the estate manager, so he's responsible for the whole estate. So actually, if they went ahead and disturbed that barn owl, it would be because he has that information, and I can prove he's got that information because I've emailed him. So
right.
I can track it. He has to act, and he told them, and because they've been told they are, they've got a good reputation, this forestry company, and actually they do have, that they will do environmental surveys. They've got people that do that. I don't think they've done it in this case, but otherwise they would have spotted the barn owl. But yeah, it's like, for goodness sake, no, we're not. We need to sort this. So I was then able to meet the farmer and the forester, show them the box, and at this point they're just taking it on trust that there's something in there. I wasn't making it up. But they actually they went back, because I could see them from my window the following morning, and they saw them both birds fly out, so they know.
Yeah.
And they were then, and then it's kind of, at first it was like, well, Natural England say you have to give, I think it's a 30-metre exclusion zone around the owls, which is really nothing much, and that worried me. But to their credit, they went to the landowners and discussed all between themselves, and they agreed 150-metre cordon around the wood, so half the wood is staying at the moment. And the barn owls are still there, and I think there's a chicken there because I can hear it, which is really exciting. But I'd had a long chat with the forester. We walked around, and he was a really, really lovely chap. He really knew his wildlife. He really cared about it. It's his job, so it's very difficult. It's hard to go in all guns blazing, and you don't care about this, because they do on the whole. And, yeah.
Can you give us some
information about which animals have some degree of protection, so that if we know of certain animals, we know what is worth notifying.
Gosh, yes. I mean, I think that nesting birds, any nesting bird, can't legally be disturbed unless you're a forestry operation
Or a farmer.
Yeah, I think if you know something is there, but that's the thing. Now we've got woodlark. I don't know if you've ever heard woodlark song. It's the most beautiful. It knocks the skylark out. This is beautiful. It's so sad and beautiful. So they're making a bit of a. It's not even a comeback because they're heathland birds, really, woodland edge birds. But we've got a few there, and I could hear them singing all through spring out the back of the house and on a couple of other fields margins around because they're ground nesters. But I didn't, and I'd mentioned them. And I know the estate manager follows me on Twitter, so I could put them on. I had woodlark out the back of my house this morning, so he knows that I know they're there. They're Schedule 1 listed, but if it was just a skylark, which hasn't got any particularly high protection, but if it's nesting and you know the nest is there and you found it, photographed it, then you've got proof it's there. You're within your rights to stop that tractor and say you can't destroy that nest. There's a nest there. It's just hard to prove, I think, and I think half the time they've already I didn't know they were going to go out with the tractor and mow all the field margins, and those birds aren't there. I don't know what happened to them, but they're not singing anymore, so I presume I think they possibly raised one brood and were going for the second one, and that was probably mown. So yeah, but it's proof. So nesting birds, gosh, I mean there's an awful lot is protected. Badgers is a classic one. Most things with young, but I suppose your headline classics are things like the barn owls, the adders, the dormice, animals like that. But there'll be plants as well. I think it's about knowing your patch, knowing what's there, finding out, really engaging with it. Evidence, and I'm writing for New Week News for nearly 18, 19 years. I've kept a real record in doing that of what's there, and I've seen what's been lost, but also what we've gained as well. And I think a diary, anything like that, is really important, because that's when you can go, I've got evidence.
Just to pick up on that question from the lady there, if there's a number of concerned individuals, locals, as Nicola said, keep a diary. There's local bat groups, be about, so bats, depending on the species, so you can do bat surveys quite easily. You can do them on your mobile phone. If you have a little adapter, it'll pick up the ultrasound, and it'll identify what there is. And some are more common than others, but so barbastels, for example, are extremely. There's no mitigation for if there's a barbastel colony. Which there's only about a dozen colonies across the country, but that that are listed. But I was involved in protecting a woodland 2 or 3 years ago, and we found barbastel bats 2 days before the tractors came in, and we managed to stop them until that was in October, and we managed to stop them until the following May when they Natural England overturned the injunction that we got to protect that woodland and that roost. So even when the protections are there, Natural England shouldn't have given that licence at all, but they argued in court that it was necessary, even though there's no mitigation. So local bat groups will do it. There's local badger groups, and like Nicola says, you get it logged with Natural England, get it,
How do you log? Because I know the iRecord app on your phone has been recommended as a place to record. Do you know the iRecord app?
Yes.
How would you log it with Natural England?
Email would write to them, get an ecologist report. There's obviously there's professional ecologists but you know, there's many people who'll do that as like lay amateurs, you know, people who've got years of experience.
I know if you belong to certain organisations, I mean like the Mammal Society for example, if you spot anything, there is on their website, you just click on something and just tell them that you've spotted it and it's registered. And I presume there's a lot of similar societies that
so you know, get it, you know, make sure people know about it.
Yeah.
You know, have a you know, an outward facing media campaign, raise it locally, and you know, and get people engaged, you know, and you know, and expand on it. So they're the main weapons that you have against, you know, this destruction.
Thames Valley Police have got a wildlife crime officer as well.
Okay.
I've forgotten his name, but we sent him lots of messages when we were trying to protect James Hall Wood.
And he only does that part time. You know, he's got other duties as well, so he does it like 2 days a week if he's lucky. But you know, there are mechanisms, but you have to tap in it. And Lawyers for Nature, you can find them.
I mean this is to do with if you're fighting something that's going to happen. But I think if
it's just like
if
you know,
you're just
the plantation.
doing something prophylactically, registering that you've seen certain things, I think that's something we could all do.
I think it's really,
rather than just, you know, thinking, oh, how wonderful, I've just seen so and so. You know, to register it
to register it,
probably is helpful.
And any published journal, like I don't know, your local bulletin that we've got a little village bulletin, anything like that, if it's in print and it's published, that really is, so you can pull it out and say, look, on this day.
And there's the Bat Trust, you know, so if you get engaged with the Bat Trust, you know, they'll give you advice on how to, you know, survey and everything else. And I've been down on the bridge, you know, at sunset and in the early evenings down in, you know, in Hungerford, where they've done bat surveys, and it's, you know, they're going in taking the mayflies and things, you know, off the, you know, and it's incredible. So there, you know, there are groups, Be About, do stuff at, you know, I know I've done surveys at the Discovery Centre in fact.
I'm wondering actually if Be About has got us, if there's anywhere on that site that you can register that you've seen something.
I mean, they would certainly, I think anybody like that, they would be able to signpost you. And I think it's so much easier now, isn't it? You know, you can find things out. It's just Google is your friend. But there are, but I think that's it. It's you can find out, and knowing what you've got and being able to work out what it is, to name it, that's a really powerful thing. And other people there, because I could say with this bar now, it's on a footpath, everybody knows it's there. So if you know, okay, you might kick me out of my house if I make a fuss, but my neighbour, you don't own their house. So like, you know, and I think that's, I'm exaggerating slightly. And they are lovely, lovely people. They care about the land, and want to do the right thing on the whole. I think it's important to say that, particularly as I'm being recorded.
Nicola, I was going to make the point, presumably is it Natural England that has a list of the scheduled protected species and that sort of thing? Where would you go for that?
They do, yes.
They do, don't
will,
they?
You will.
Yes.
Natural England.
Yeah. Or at the very least they'll be, like Nicola said, they'll be able to signpost you to, you know, the different conservancy groups.
I'm going to offer, I've got a little bit on my website Penny Post, but if you could help me and just do a guide so we can answer these questions, go to here, this is where you need the information, this is how you record and where you need to record, and these are the species that are the most priority to record, and we just have it in one place.
One place would be amazing. That, But I think there's a lot. I think it's about sharing things as well. Well, if you find something out, you know, if we let Penny know and it can be in that place, that would be amazing.
But
because
it
I
needs
think
to be on an official, whether it's this I record, I don't know where this data goes, but this is what I've heard from other people. If you want to prevent, another thing, you want to prevent houses being built where you live, record stuff, record the wildlife that's there as well.
You never know when it, you know, it's just, nothing is safe, everything is sacred, and I think that's a powerful thing to remember. You know, love it and spread that love as well. And I think that's really important, because the more of us that know about stuff. I want to come on to this. Have I got time? Sorry, the time has gone. This is part of what we've been talking about, really. So this is kind of an idea I came up with the Eco Club students, and I've written an article, and if you want to, you can search it up. So if you put my name in, Nicola Chester, RSPB Swiss, there's an article there. Now, I'm not just promoting that I've written it, but I spoke to an awful lot of Swift experts, and I learned a lot about how we can protect these birds, how incredible they are. Does everybody recognise a swift?
Yeah.
Yeah? Excellent. You can confuse them very easily with house martins. They've got white bottoms and they blow raspberries when they like this funny sort of noise as they go back.
It's like springwatch, isn't it?
Yeah, it is absolutely like springwatch. Yes. Springwatch every day in our house.
We like it too.
Good.
We
yes. So that's the house martins. Swallows are the ones that make the so house martins will nest little mud cups on the outside of buildings. Swallows do the same, but quite often under a ledge, and they've got the forked swallowtails. And the swifts are the screamers, so they're these incredible boomerangs. I think the poet Edward Thomas said it's like the bow has gone off with the arrow, and they look like, was it Edward Thomas or was it Ted Hughes? No, Ted Hughes said the swifts are returning, the world's still working. So what's happened is the swifts aren't returning. We're losing the numbers, and if you watch, we've got a fantastic little colony of swifts in Hungerford. They will have been round longer than Hungerford has been here. Swifts would have nests in little crevices and cracks in trees and cliffs, even in our chalk cliffs, alongside Tyrannosaurus rex. They are that old, and they've hardly changed since that time. They are the most incredible bird, and as I say, they are. I've got a picture to show you. You can see little few of them.
That's
So
nice.
that kind of, you can see where that the bow has gone off with the arrow shape, and they scream around the rooftops. They're only here for a very few short weeks. They literally come here, they follow the rains and the insects from Africa. They get here, they go to the nesting spot that they have used for probably generations. They know where it is. They get on with the nesting business, raise some chicks, and they're gone. And the chicks have to make their own way back on their own to Africa. When those chicks leave the nest, and forgive me if you know all this stuff, then they won't touch ground for probably another 3 to 4 years. They stay in the air, they do everything in the air until it's time to nest. They even collect nesting material in the air, which is it's not much. And
they don't ever come down to rest?
Never come down to, no, they are in the air all the time. They drink on the wing, so they'll just sip raindrops, and they even mate on the wing. They'll sleep up there, they do the whole dolphin half brain thing when they sit, so they'll go up to somewhere near the stratosphere and they'll sleep on the wing. They are just amazing.
And what times are they here?
So they are here now. So that sort of fairground scream that you can hear, that's them in the evenings. And there used to be big parties of them in Hungerford and Kintbury. They like areas near water. Don't actually get a lot of them out where I am in Inkpen, but they quite often come up to sleep. I don't know whether it's something to do with thermal, so in the evenings they start to come.
Yeah, I know my husband mentioned the other day.
Swifts, yeah.
So when you see birds lined up on the telegraph wires, those aren't swifts.
No,
Those
definitely
are swallows.
If it's on something, it's not a swift, unless it's on a building. But yeah, they will only ever land at the nest, and the rest of the time they're in the air. They're just so honed for flight. They're incredible. But yeah, the young birds, they'll take 3 to 4 years before they mature enough to go nest, and that's the time when they'll cling to a wall. They haven't even got legs. They've got tiny feet, and they're so designed for flight.
And even if they're not nesting, do they still follow that same migratory path?
Yes.
Each year.
Each year, yeah, yeah. And I mean, gosh, they're I wish I'd put a picture of them up here with some fantastic pictures, but they're almost reptilian when you get close up to one, which I never have done, but people have. I've seen photographs. They've got these fantastic bristles around their mouths, and they'll feed, and they feed on flying insects. Yeah.
The swifts come back year after year to the front entrance of Ramsbury Church.
Yeah.
Okay.
They come back all summer,
It's
don't
a little bit of a problem because of the droppings. But apart from that, you know, they
They're
care for them.
definitely swifts,
They-
not swallows.
I think I was told they were swifts.
Okay. So if there's a mud cup, then there's swallows or house martins. If there's no mud cup, then they're so swifts will they post themselves into a tiny crevice or a gap. So the next thing about what I want to say about this is we are losing our swifts at a shocking rate. They are now red listed, which means they're in danger of extinction. The numbers have plummeted. This is the first year they've been put on the British Trust for Ornithology's red list, so we are losing them. These incredible birds, they've been around since the dinosaur. Suddenly we're losing them. Lots of research going on into why, and I was going to say this article, literally if you just Google RSPB Save Our Swifts, there's loads on there about how to help swifts. So if you forget any of this, it's on there. So we're losing them. We're losing them. We think for the following reasons: the lack of nesting space. They will nest on buildings, in cracks, in gaps in fascia boards or soffits. I can't remember which way around it is. And the eaves. They'll nest in church towers. They will nest. It has to be quite high up-ish, sort of about that kind of height, because they need that kind of swoop to come out. But there isn't an actual nest that you will see. So the big problem for them is all this energy to come back here, they nest, they get to where they've nested or their parents have nested, the crack has been closed up because the building's been renovated, and that's what's happening, or the building's been knocked down. I think buildings on the whole are better maintained these days because we're thinking about insulation as well, which has a knock-on effect with these birds. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is their insect food. So we know there's an absolute insectageddon, you know, all the insects are crashing, the population's crashing, so they come all this way, there's nothing for them to eat. So they are the two main problems for our swifts. So what we're asking you to do, so our Eco Club, our lovely students at John Gaunt School, we want you to do these things. We want to be a swift town. There's quite a few swift towns around. They're celebrating their swifts. Some of them have street parties when the swifts are here. It's Swift Awareness Week this week. There's a good time to be launching this. We've already got a logo. Our lovely art teacher has designed this logo. It doesn't normally have a black background. That was my computer messing about. You know, it's that. So we hope to be able to use that. We've got a champion in this, in Jonathan Pomeroy. Who knows Jonathan? Yeah. So Jonathan Pomeroy was an ex-student at John Gaunt School, and fantastic artist, fantastic naturalist. Now lives in Yorkshire, I think. But he's on board with this as well because he can remember all the places the swifts were. So what we need to do is first of all work out where the birds are nesting and protect those nests. So there's a lot of renovation work going on in Hungerford at the moment. So if you see, we know there are swifts in Hungerford, if you see screaming parties of swifts, you can record it on the Swift Mapper. And again, if you just search RSPB Swift Mapper, it comes up and it takes you very simply through the stages, and you can say this is where swifts are. But you have to recognise that they're swifts and not swallows, so they have to be either screaming, making this noise that you'll hear it when you go out, or you can actually see them going into a nest, and that's really what we want to know, that they're going into that nest. The putting up nest boxes bit, most of us won't be able to do this because we haven't got tall houses. It's a big one, but maybe we can convince the town council, the people with appropriate, we could put some up at school, the church, so that if birds are coming back and that building has been improved, it's beautifully insulated and sealed in, then we can put nest boxes up and the birds can have somewhere to go.
Do they prefer a particular direction? I mean, I'm sort of putting nest boxes up, and I've looked at where they're probably nesting, and they seem to be nesting towards the northeast. I mean, I never know whether that is a crucial.
Yeah, that's really. I don't know. Is the honest answer. I don't know. They like a it has to be a particular type of nest.
Yes.
With a very small narrow slot that almost represents or replicates rather a narrow crack in a wall.
Well, they certainly
for example,
prefer
but-
somewhere where they've been before.
Yes, yes. And you could put a nest box up and you might not have any swifts there for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, but then, or more I'm told, but it could be that 10th year where a house has been bought and done up and the nest hole has been closed off and they suddenly come back to the nest hole, nothing there, then they'll find your nest box. So we want to be doing some of that, but maybe thinking about fundraising, working out where we can put these boxes.
Nicola,
Yeah.
Google with your friend. Boxes should face in a northwesterly or northeasterly direction.
Oh.
Good. The reason is to shelter them from the glare of the sun.
Yes.
Swifts fly straight into the nesting areas, so there should be a clear adjacent airspace.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. There you go. There you go.
Well, I've got a sight problem, so I don't see them very much nowadays, but I can hear them. And we've just been noticing over the years the way the numbers have decreased.
It's just so sad.
Appalling.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember them in their,
20s.
20s, yes, and in Newbury as well. They've declined, and of course, we also have to remember that once they've nested and the birds have fledged, then there will be more swifts. So towards the end of the summer, there will be more, and that makes us all feel a bit better. But yeah, this is really important. But the other thing, of course, is to encourage. I'm not sure what I meant by that. I didn't do any editing of that, did I? Insect-rich habitat, insect-rich habitats, I think. I was in a bit of a hurry. So those wonderful grassy spaces that we can leave, the better. And we're lucky we've got the fantastic, the common. We've got the town and manor. So we have got a lot, but we need more. And of course that has a knock-on effect for everything else as well, for other birds. So swift is our champion bird, but it will bring other things along with it, which is really important. And I think the other thing that I envisage that sort of when Tutty Day is done with, that we'll have other flags up, and there'll be flags like this will be like welcoming our swifts all up the high street and that sort of thing. So what I'm trying to do then with our students is we'll be sending out emails to anybody and everybody, I think, in Hungerford, so the businesses, the church, trying to get everybody on board. So if you can help in any way, do that. So, and it's just, it's just about, it can be it doesn't have to be coordinated by us, really, but it's just mapping the swifts. If you spot a nest, monitor it, record it, and then make sure that if you see scaffolding going up, even if it's in the autumn or the middle of winter, then we need to find out who owns that building and say, look, there are swifts nesting in there, so we need to do something. I can see them out the window. We're trying to save you. But we can say to whoever owns that building, you're doing a great job making building beautiful, but we need boxes up there because you're sealing up the holes. And
are there specific boxes for swifts?
Yes, there are, and they are. I haven't got a picture to show you, but they are specific boxes. So we'll probably try and do some kind of fundraising so that we can do the boxes and get that going.
They're pretty cheap, actually.
Here we go. John's on the case.
And also.
Oh, brilliant!
So they've got quite a narrow.
Oh,
like a little.
And is that horizontal or vertical?
It's horizontal. I like that. Because they go in at one side.
Okay.
They go into it at one side, and then their nesting sort of cup is on the other side.
If you can find footage of them, and it's quite easy to find online, they're astonishing because they come at this box at a screaming rate, and they just stall just before they get it. They fold their wings back and they post themselves in, and on their little feet, because they haven't got legs, they just kind of go into their nest. But there's not much nesting material in there either, and they'll raise their chicks, and then they're off, and the chicks will leave the nest. Once they've left the nest and flown around a bit, the parents are gone, and they just amazing. But they're just incredible creatures. But I think if we can do this, if we can make Hungerford a swift town, it'd be a marvellous thing. And then next year, we'll make it a hedgehog town.
Yeah.
Penny?
For what I've read about it, the boxes aren't easy to install because it has to be done quite high up, and they say you know you almost need a builder to do it. So I could imagine we could do a Swift box installation day and get some traders, because you want it done properly. If you're going to, you know, and I think people are going to need help.
Yes.
And apparently, if you haven't already got Swifts on your street, it's worth playing a CD of their calls.
Yes.
That's what I've heard people do.
Yeah.
And that might
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a really good point. Yes, because I mean I can't.
So
I don't know how.
So planning for next year then, when should the boxes be up and ready by?
So I think the Swifts they're almost the last migrant to arrive and the first to go. They're not here much, not for a long time. I think sort of early spring. I think if we can identify where the nests are, some of you may already know, and then we can see. But that's an excellent idea, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to approach the caretaker at school and say, can you put your ladder up there and put some boxes up, because he's going to go, I haven't got a ladder. Enough. So
I think we need to find a friendly builder who's got a ladder who'll spend the day.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. This is what I think it's something we need to do together. And
A couple of points. Swifts like to nest communally, don't
They
they?
do,
So
yes.
if you know there's somewhere like in the eaves of my next door neighbour's house where they've already nested, then if you can see somewhere room for another one, then that's a really good place, because they will be screaming along there and checking out and seeing if there's
And of course, I'm sure the
free
young
accommodation.
ones will, if they're coming back to where their parents have nested,
That's
Yeah.
right.
they'll be
That's
looking
what
for
they're
extra
doing.
nesting.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah,
nesting
absolutely.
places, don't they?
And another point is that you can buy bricks now if you're
Oh gosh,
building
yes.
a new house, and you can get the builder to put a brick in at the appropriate place. I don't know whether there was any planning about that. Do you
Yeah,
know,
the
Caroline?
district council, the planning committee is allowed to say that you have to put Swift bricks in to development.
Okay.
So if Hungerford's got its own planning committee, if you comment on new developments, you could actually write on there, we'd quite like you to put some Swift bricks in.
Brilliant.
And if you mention it to the district council as well, then they can make that point at the committee.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's excellent. I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't do this years ago, but the big development at the top of Hungerford, really, that would have been perfect, especially at the top of town. Yeah, so lots we can do. Yeah.
I've only recently discovered about having to disinfect bird boxes, and I wonder, with bug hotels, that people are making thousands of bug hotels now,
Yeah.
apparently they should be cleaned out,
Yeah.
and I just don't know who is doing this, but a Swift box sounds like impossible to clean.
Impossible, I know.
But they don't need much cleaning out, actually, Penny,
Oh.
because they collect so little material, because they have to collect it all on the wing. But there's nothing in there for lice and everything to live on. So you
Oh, so
don't-
to compare to a normal bird
Yes.
box, it's
Yeah,
not
that's
so
right.
much.
so you don't have to clear it out.
Oh, good.
Fortunately.
Yeah, very good point. And I think as well, they're in there such a short time that the nest box would probably be scorched by the sun and frozen all that time as well.
But it is true that normal bird boxes, you should clean them out.
Yeah, it is. I think particularly crucially, especially in the light of bird flu and the way that's really gripping a hold at the moment. But certainly bird tables, bird baths, feeders need cleaning all the time. That's really important. Bird boxes, I know I've got some up that I can't get to, and they never get cleaned out. Especially my sparrows, I just can't get to them. But it is important. I don't know how important, but it'd be worth. And the RSPB or the British Trust for Ornithology will give you some advice on that. Yeah.
Basically.
And we get I could go on forever. Sorry. I just really hope I haven't been too negative about. I've had a bad week with trees and hedge cutting and all sorts of things. But I think there's so much we can do, and I think the more of us doing it together and sharing ideas like this, it makes it a really positive thing.
I think this is a nice uplifting opportunity to finish on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
It's quite hopeful, isn't it? Can I just say thank you to Nicola? You've really made me think tonight. I think she's made us all think about standing up and actually getting involved. And the Swifts, who knew? I certainly didn't know. Fantastic. So on behalf of Heat, Nicola, thank you so much for coming and doing this. Perhaps we can all just say thank you.